Ableton Live includes many useful audio effects, and in this video we are gonna explore them all. To skip to a certain effect, click a desired timestamp in the description. This is the ultimate Ableton audio effects guide, so it doesn't matter whether you're just starting out or have been producing for some time. Making this tutorial took me so much time, so if you end up learning something from it, make sure to share it with your producer's friends so they can expand their knowledge too. Remember that not all audio effects might be included depending on your Live's version. All the effects are included in the top version of Ableton, which is Ableton Live Suite. Amp is an effect that emulates the sound and character of 7 classic guitar amplifiers. Amp uses physical modeling technology to provide a range of authentic and usable amplifier tones with a simple and consistent set of controls. Clean, boost, blues, rock, lead, heavy and bass. Those are the 7 types of amps. Click on each of them to see what they sound like. So this is the dry guitar sound. Now let's turn on amp. At the left bottom, gain. Adjust the level input to the preamp. Higher gain results in a more distorted sound. Then bass, middle and treble work as an EQ to shape the tone of the sound. Presence knob controls mid-high frequencies. The volume knob is the output volume of the amp. Also, while using blues, heavy and bass amp modes, it creates some additional distortion. The mono button makes your sound mono or stereo. The dry wet knob controls the amount of the dry and wet signal. This is really useful if you want to blend a distortion with the original sound. This one allows you to group effects into chains. Also, you can create macros that then can be modulated.
So I'ma light it up just like a cigarette smoke till it's in my head, take it all away.
This is really useful to create racks that can be quickly accessed and used later. Auto filter. Auto filter effect provides classic analog filter emulation. It can be modulated by an envelope follower or an LFO to create moving filter effects. In the middle of this effect is the filter control panel. It allows you to change filter types, the strength of the slopes, circuit options, or the type of resonance limiting, quantize, which updates the filter by a certain amount of time. So the filter controls. Frequency is the position of the filter. Let's check this out. It's gonna sound differently depending on the filter type. This particular one allows you to morph between the previous filters. The resonance knob is the amount of the resonance that is being created. Some of the resonance limiting options allow you to add distortion. On the right side we have an LFO, sample and hold section. Increasing the amount will start the filter automation. If you want to, you can click this button to sync the modulation to your host tempo. In this place you can choose one of the available LFO shapes. Also you can turn on this random modulation that also makes your sound wide. or a sample and hold. We're gonna stick to this one. The phase knob is the position of the filter in a stereo field. Once you increase this knob, you'll notice that the sound bounces off the left and right channel, making it really wide. The offset knob allows you to delay the starting position of the LFO. So on the left side we have an envelope follower section, and this is super useful because it detects the transients of the sound and opens the filter or closes depending on the settings. So the envelope knob is the amount of modulation. You can go to the right side, it's gonna mean the filter will be opening to this side, and if you go down, it's gonna be closing. Now the attack determines how quickly the envelope follower will react. The release knob sets for how long it will remain active. So for the quick detection, reduce the attack, and for a tighter sound, reduce the release. Autopan. Autopan offers LFO-driven manipulation of amplitude and panning for creating automatic panning, tremolo and amplitude modulation, and beat synchronized chopping effects. Amount is, as usual, the amount of the modulation. Rate is a speed of the modulation. Phase is the position in stereo. You can set it to 0 to turn an autopan into the volume automation. You can click this button to invert the LFO. Once you sync the rate of the LFO to your host tempo, you will be able to access an offset knob. This allows you to delay the LFO modulation shape. You can change the shape of the LFO and make it smoother or sharper with the shape knob. Right here, you can change the shape of the LFO. While using not synchronize, right here, these two knobs represent where the starting position is. Using the first option moves the whole LFO modulation shape left, and using the second one makes it start at the beginning. Beat repeat simply catches the incoming signal and repeats it for a certain amount of time, with the ability to also filter the sound, mix, pitch and decay. The interval control defines how often beat repeat captures new material and it begins repeating it. Now every 1/8 bar the beat repeat will capture the signal and start repeating it. Now if we decrease that to 1 bar, every 1 bar there's gonna be signal captured by beat repeat and then it's gonna be repeated. As you can see, this little dot here that shines from time to time shows where the sound is being captured, how often. You can use the offset knob to offset the capture position. Remember that this will also add a bit of the delay to the sound because it's capturing the sound a little bit later. You can think of the grid knob as of the speed of the repetitions. You can turn off triplets if you don't want them to appear in the grid knob. Variation controls grid size by randomizing it. Variation modes set how the variation will be applied. The chance knob determines the probability of the repetition to occur. If set to 100%, the repetition will occur every single time. Click repeat to manually trigger beat repeat. You can also automate this one to trigger with an automation line. The gate knob defines a total length of repetitions. You can shift the pitch down. If you want, you can also decay it. Click the filter button to turn it on and set it according to your needs. See how much movement beat repeats adds to the whole song. Mix, insert, and gate decide how the repeated sound will be mixed with the original. Mix, both original sound and repetitions will play. Insert will insert repetitions when they occur, making the original signal quiet. And the gate will only play repetitions. You can also fade the repetitions by using the decay knob. Volume defines the loudness of the repetitions. Wow, this is just beautiful. Cabinet. Cabinet is an effect that emulates the sound of 5 classic guitar cabinets. You can set different cabinets to define how the sound was captured. You can also decide whether you want your output to be mono or stereo. Channel EQ. This one is pretty straightforward. It's just a simple EQ. If you need to boost or cut something quickly, this one gets pretty useful. The chorus effect uses 2 parallel time-modulated delays to create chorus and flanging effects. Chorus includes 2 delays that you can either link together or not. You can also use one of them only or modulate one with another. This is the delay time. You can high pass the delay number 1. You can link both delay times by clicking this button. In this section, you decide whether you want your delay number 2 to be on or off. The fix means that the delay 1 will only receive the modulation and the delay 2 will stay at a fixed value. And a mod means that both of the delays, the delay number 1 and 2, will be modulated with the modulation section that we are going into right now. In the modulation section, you can decide how much chorus is going to be applied and how quick the modulation will occur. You can also multiply the values by 20 by clicking here. Feedback will be useful to adjust the length of the chorus. If you want a bit different sound, you can reverse the polarity. Also a quick tip, if you right-click the plugin, you can enable the crisp mode. This is gonna improve the sound quality, particularly at higher frequencies. Compressor. Okay, so finally, compression. A topic that seems to be pretty hard to understand by a lot of people, but it's fairly simple. You take a sound and make what's too loud quieter. It will be easier to understand how the compressor works if we set the ratio to infinity to 1. That means the sound will be limited when it reaches a certain threshold. For example, peaks that are louder than -10 decibels will stay at the threshold of -10 decibels. That's what a ratio infinity to 1 means. Take a look now as I decrease the threshold to -10. So after you compress a sound, you need to know how quick you should stop compressing. That's when the release knob comes in. The longer the time, the longer it will take the volume reduction to recover. The quicker the time, the quicker it will go back to its neutral state. This is gonna result in a more squashed sound. And in some cases, it will create some additional distortion. Also, while compressing, you want to know when you should start compressing. Now, 10 milliseconds later, 50 milliseconds later. This is what the attack knob is for. The time of the attack dictates how fast the compressor will start reducing the volume. Will it be delayed or instant? So the attack set to really low, it's gonna catch some transients. If I set the attack a little bit higher, it's gonna catch the middle of the sound. So higher attack values create more of a transient heavy sound. So now the ratio is some sort of conversion of how much compression should be applied based on the threshold level. Also, the volume reduction is dependent on the attack and release setting. As you can see, if I set the attack to really low, there's more compression because the sound is being detected earlier. So now as we pull down the ratio, you should see that the volume reduction is getting smaller because the ratio is getting smaller. So remember the attack? This works along with the look ahead. This one though sees the signal before it appears, so it can start compressing earlier. If reducing transients is what you want, then go ahead and set it to 1 or 10 milliseconds. The new control adjusts how gradually or abruptly compression occurs as the threshold is approached. So let's see. Here you can switch between different views. I personally prefer this one because it shows you visually the compression. You can also turn the compressor into expander, which makes the sound louder instead of quieter. RMS mode causes the compressor to be less sensitive to very short peaks and compresses only when the incoming signal has exceeded the threshold for a slightly longer time. Let's check this out. Peak is like really sensitive, while RMS is just dialed back a bit. Using RMS seems to create some additional transients to the sound. If that's what you're looking for, you can dial back the tri-wet knob to do what's called a parallel compression. So the makeup button is the automatic gain. Once you click it, the output gain will be automatically adjusted. The output section allows you to see the output signal instead of the input and compression. So the dark gray signal is the original signal and the light gray one is the compressed one. You can also sidechain a certain sound by turning on the sidechain and sending a signal from a desired track, like a kick. You can also turn on EQ to have sidechain triggered only by certain frequencies of the kick. Also, the pre-effects means that the sidechain will take the tri-signal of the kick. The post-effect means that it will take the signal after the processing chain. Corpus. Corpus is an effect that simulates the acoustic characteristics of 7 types of resonant objects. If you want to add some tonality to the sound, Corpus is a great tool for that. So in the middle section, you can choose what material is gonna be used as a resonator. Tune allows you to tune the type of resonance to a certain key. At the bottom here you can see what key exactly you're on. Also how much offset this is. If you get some cent value you can dial this back so it's the exact pitch. Now the spread knob makes your sound wide. It basically detunes the sound and makes it wide. On the left side we have an LFO that modulates the tune of the corpus. So as it was in AutoPan, spin and phase options are the starting positions. So let's go back to the middle section. In this place you can choose how many overtones will be created. You can think of the material as of the mid to high frequencies ratio. So the listening L and listening R are the positions of resonators. The hit is the position at which the resonator has been hit. You can think of it as a physical object that has been hit. This one adjusts the pitch of resonators' harmonics. Brightness controls, well, brightness. In some of the cases, additional knobs are available like ratio. Or opening and closing. This one opens or closes the pipe. The decay knob sets the length of the resonator. You can use the radius knob to control a tone of the resonator. This controls the decay and high frequency sustain. Also, you can apply a filter. And you can make it mono or white. The bleed knob mixes the portion of unprocessed sound with the processed one. Delay. Well, I think you know this one. It doubles your sound and repeats every certain amount of time for a certain amount of time.
Bad, bad, bad love.
You can apply a filter to it if you want to.
Love.
3 delay modes allow you to choose between how you want your delay to change while messing with the time parameters. Repitch will make that pitch shifting effect. Fade will crossfade. and jump will cut instantly to the new delay time. Try setting the delay to 100% wet on repitch mode and automating the time parameter for a nice pitch shifting effect. You can turn on ping pong to make the delay stereo. Feedback controls how long the delay will last.
Love, 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 love.
Left and right decide how often the delay will appear. You can link them or make them separate. If you set the delay to 100% wet, you can offset one of the stereo channels to make what's called a Haas effect.
Love.
In modulation section, you can modulate the delay parameters, rate, filter, time. This is great for adding movement to the sound. Try increasing time to make that lo-fi wobble effects. Drum bass. Drum bass is an analog-style drum processor that was designed to add body and character to a group of drums while gluing them together in a tight mix. There are 3 distortion types and drive that changes the amount of them. Below, we have a trim slider that reduces the input level. Comp lets you turn on a fixed compressor. Which is kinda good for adding some transients. Crunch adjusts the amount of sine shape distortion applied to mid-high frequencies. The dump control is a low-pass filter which removes unwanted high frequencies that can occur after adding distortion. Then the transient knob allows you to add tightness to the sound or make it more squashed. Boom makes your drums boom, and the frequency allows you to tune the boom. Also, decay is how long you want boom to boom boom. Click here to quantize to the closest note. You can also preview to only boom by clicking these headphones. At the end we got a drive control that you can just use to blend the drum bass into the original sound. The dynamic tube effect infuses sound with the twist of tube saturation. An integrated envelope follower generates dynamic tonal variations related to the level of the input signal. A, B, and C are the different tube models with different quality. Tone directs the distortion to low, mid, or high frequencies depending on the position of the knob. The bias knob sort of makes your sound broken and is also modulated by an envelope follower. Hey, do you remember the delay effect we talked about previously? This is its beefier version.
When I don't say a word. When I don't say
So the panel on the left is the same thing as in delay, it just controls the time. You can additionally control the input of the signal and you can invert the feedback. The middle panel shows you a visual delay representation, also includes a filter right here. Now you can also choose mid-side delay mode that separates delay into mid and side signals. Echo lets you add reverb onto the delay and lets you do it in different places. Before, after delay, or to the feedback. The decay section sets the length of the reverb. Modulation section is much more expanded in this case, but it consists of the same elements plus an envelope follower. Also in this case you can choose what LFO shape you're gonna use for the modulations. Additional effects are built into this delay. Gate lets you set the gate at the beginning of the processing chain. Ducking allows you to sidechain the wet signal with the dry one. You can add noise, it sounds weird, just listen. At the end we have that lo-fi wobble effect. EQ8. This is the most popular and the most often used EQ in Ableton. It consists of 8 bands, 8 types each. The listening mode, frequency show, not show option, stereo, left, right, mid, side, adaptive EQ, which results in narrowing the Q at higher gain levels, just like that. It just makes it narrower or wider. Scale, which is sort of a dry wet knob. If you have a certain EQ shape, you can just scale it down or scale it up to accentuate or just scale it down. If you right click on EQ, you can access oversampling. Turn that on for higher quality. You probably won't hear this, but because there is an option, why not to click it? Also, if you double click the EQ, you can access the big view. So in this section you can select whether you want the EQ to affect both left and right channel separately, or mid and side signal. So if you click left and right, you can click L and R to switch between EQs. Now we are targeting the right channel, and now we are targeting the left one. So you can make much fuller sound just by EQing two stereo channels differently. Also, now we can switch to mid-side mode. This is gonna do the mid signal and the side signal separately. So now we are targeting the mono signal. Now we're targeting the side signal. There's a bit of a easier control than just moving this here and adjusting the Q. You can hold Alt while positioning the EQ band and drag the mouse up and down to reduce or make the Q bigger. EQ3. EQ3 is a smaller version of EQ8 without most of the functions and with no visual response. If what you want is to quickly boost or cut lows, mids or highs, this is a great one. You can also turn off certain bands to make them quiet. Frequency low and high set the frequency range of low and high bands. "24 and 48 sets how drastic the filter is. Erosion. With erosion, you can quickly add a noise to your sound that follows its envelope. Also, some sine modulation is possible. At the bottom you can set what frequencies, how many, and how loud you want to affect. External audio effect. This effect allows you to route signals from and to, set the gain separately, invert the phase, see peaks, and set the latency. This is just a routing effect that allows you to just send sounds from to, and that's it. Filter delay. Filter delay is a delay but with separate controls for left, right, and left plus right channels. Filter can be applied on each of them. They can be panned and have their own volume channels. So let's turn on only the left input for now. You can see that the delay has been created in the left channel. We can set its parameters like the time, like the filter options right here. We can set the feedback right here and the volume right here. And the same chain is being applied also to the right channel and to the left plus right channel, which is, we can say, the middle. So you can create 3 different delays with 3 different times and 3 different filters and 3 different volumes. Flanger. Flanger uses 2 parallel time modulated delays to create flanging effects. We're gonna use this saw wave here as an example. Now, after turning on the flanger, we get the flanging effects. So the reason why they're being modulated is because the LFO is already turned on. So let's bring the amount to 0 and now there will be no modulation, thus the sound will not move. So using this panel you can control delay time and feedback of the flanger. Increasing the feedback will make the sound more resonating, while increasing the delay time will increase the length of each delay. So you can manually modulate the delay time, for example, to create things like this. Also, there's a high-pass filter that allows you to apply a high-pass filter to a sound. Using this button, you can invert the polarity of the flanger. With modulating delay time, you can make these really talking kind of filter movement automation. So along with this, we have an envelope follower and LFO sample and hold section. So the envelope follower will be mostly useful for sounds that are more dynamic, like drums and synths that have more dynamic range instead of the ones that are sustained. So let's apply the envelope follower to this guy first. So there's not much movement, but if we apply to the sound that is more like a staccato one, we're getting some of the time changes. You can also use an LFO sample and hold modulation to modulate this well with an LFO. You can choose different shapes of the LFO. Frequency shifter. Frequency shifter allows you to move all the frequencies left or right, creating odd pitch shifting effects. You can use a modulator to automate the fine tune or do it yourself. It also includes a ring modulation and a drive knob that allows you to distort an incoming signal. Enabling the white button creates a stereo effect by inverting the polarity of the spread value for the right channel. This means that increasing the spread value will shift the frequency down in the right channel while shifting it up in the left. Also, you can use a modulator to automate the fine tune. Gate. The gate effect passes only signals whose level exceeds a user-specified threshold. A gate can eliminate low-level noise that occurs between sounds, for example hiss or hum. In this case it's gonna be a vinyl crackle. Or shape a sound by turning up the threshold so that it cuts off reverb or delay tails. Setting floor to -infinity and moving the threshold up allows you to decide how much of the sound will get through the gate. You can think of the floor as of the dry-wet knob. Once the signal passes through the gate, you can set how long it will stay up, how quickly the gate will react, and for how long it will fade. Return sets the difference between the level that opens the gate and the level that closes it. Flip allows you to reverse the gate and cut parts that are going beyond the threshold level. With this one you can create really cool ducking effects. Glue compressor. So fortunately we've already explained how the compressor works, so I'm gonna skip this part. First of all, the glue compressor has a really useful function, a soft clipper. Turn on the soft clip and push the makeup gain. If you use it on drums, they're gonna knock. Glue Compressor was mainly designed for use on the master track or a group track to glue multiple sources together into a cohesive sounding mix. The range knob simply limits the compression amount. So now the compression goes above 10 decibels of gain reduction. If we bring the range down, you will see that it will stop below the 10. Grain delay. The grain delay effect slices the input signal into tiny particles called grains that are then individually delayed and can also have different pitches compared to the original signal source. If you're familiar with the granular synthesis, this is almost it. Start with rising the pitch up an octave. Now move the frequency down to reduce the speed or the length of the grain. Feedback makes the output of the sound come back to the input and be affected by all the settings again. So having pitch on +12 will create grains that are 24 pitch and then 36 and so on. You can also randomize the pitch. All of these settings are as well accessible through a graph here. Make sure to choose which parameter you want to modulate, and then you can do it by just clicking this dot here and dragging it. You can see that now I'm modulating the dry wet and feedback at once. Also, there are here default delays functions like delay time, sync, and beat offset. The spray randomizes the position of the grains so that they are playing at different times. It can add that really smooth effect. Limiter. Limiter takes an incoming signal and cuts its volumes at a specified ceiling level. In this case, the limiter will limit the signal at -3 decibels. In this place, you can see the gain reduction. Limiter is also a compressor, so it includes things like input gain, look ahead, and release. You can switch between stereo and left-right limiting. This is gonna enable you to limit left and right channels separately. Looper. Looper allows you to record, play, overdub, and, well, loop the incoming signal. To start, simply put it on the master and start recording. Then play some sounds. So before you start recording, I highly recommend to go into tempo control and click follow song tempo, because the default settings that are being set and follow song tempo are kinda not working properly because they have to detect the tempo, I suppose, and that sometimes just doesn't work properly. So follow song tempo. If you need to, you can turn on the metronome. So if you're playing an instrument, you probably can't click the button and start recording at the same time because probably you need both hands to play the instrument, or you just want to have some time to prepare before recording actually. So for this thing, there's a quantization option. So if you go here, you can set how much the looper is gonna wait before it starts recording. So I like to set 2 bars. And actually what you have to do is to enable playback, is to just start the playback in Ableton, and then you hit this, and then you start playing something. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna also play drums to it. So I wanna overdub immediately after I stop playing chords. So this part here means that the looper is gonna record for a certain amount of bars. I'm gonna choose 4 because I'm gonna have a 4-bar chord progression. And then this is the action that is gonna do. It can either overdub or play. So I'm gonna set this to overdub, and that's basically it. Start the playback in Ableton and start recording. So now we have a chord progression along with the drum beat. Now what you can do, you can undo if you made some mistakes, you can clear the whole thing. We're not gonna be doing that. We can manipulate the length, we can make this shorter or we can make this longer. This is just gonna cut the length, it's not gonna be speeding this up. So very handy are pitch and reverse controls. You can speed this whole thing up and thus pitching this up as well. You can also reverse the whole thing. So once you're done, you can just drag this thing here that says drag me, and you're gonna get the thing straight from the looper, which is in this case that drums and chords loop. So this feedback decides how much of the original signal goes to overdubbing. So let's say I'm gonna add some vocals to it. Like that. So this section decides when the input signal is being heard. So in this case, this is gonna be always heard. So it doesn't matter if I play now here along with the vocals, or I just play it without the vocals. Wait, what? Yeah, it's gonna be playing all the time, doesn't matter if there's any sound on the input. So now if we set this to never and I play this back, even if there's a vocal on my timeline, it's not being played. You can't hear it. So the third option means that the input is only audible when recording or overdubbing. So I'm gonna start overdubbing here. Okay, so that's that. We can play this back to see whether it got recorded. Yeah, so I'm gonna undo that. So it's clean, and we're gonna do the fourth option. So the fourth option means that the input is audible when there's a recording or overdubbing happening, but it's not audible when the looper is playing. So check this out. I'm gonna play this back. There was no vocal, but I'm gonna start overdubbing. Multiband Dynamics is a multiband compressor divided into 3 bands. Allows you to compress them individually. The panel on the left side allows you to set the positions of each band and their input levels. If you want, you can turn on bands using these 3 buttons. You can adjust the starting point of each filter using these 2 sliders. Also, you can solo them so you can hear what you are actually targeting. Also, soft knee and RMS options can be accessed here. With soft knee enabled, compression or expansion begins gradually as the threshold is approached. The RMS peak switch also affects how quickly Multiband Dynamics responds to level changes. These are a couple of types of compressions here. Downward compression makes loud signals quieter. Upward compression makes quiet signals louder. Downward expansion makes quiet signals quieter. Upward expansion makes loud signals louder. This This is gonna make sense in a second. Let's now take a look at blocks. Blocks on the left represent the signal below, and on the right, above. Below means that affected will be the signal below a certain threshold. So let's say I'm gonna be targeting the upper band. And our volume is just about here, right? Dragging left or right on the edges of these blocks adjusts the threshold level. As you mouse over the middle of the block, the cursor will change to up, down arrow. Click and drag up or down to make the signal within the selected volume range louder or quieter. This is really a ratio of the compressor. Attack and release are available under T. Basically, T is time, B is below, which is the blocks on the left, and A is above, which is the bars on the right side. So as you change parameters on the middle view, you will be able to see them change here. You can also set a certain values in this place under B or A option. In here, you can adjust output levels of each band. And here the output of the whole effect. And here the time of the compression. Push it to the right to make it tighter and to the left to make it more squashed. This is gonna make sense in a moment after we compress this sound. Multiband Dynamics seems to be pretty complex at the beginning, so let's take a look at this example. It's gonna reset all the settings. Let's say I want to apply a compression on the high frequencies. I'm just gonna bring this to this part because you can do the same thing with both below and above compressions. I'm just gonna use this one. So as you can see, nothing happens. There's no gain reduction because as we go into above, there's ratio 1:1. So it does nothing. As we move the ratio up or down, we will decide how much compression will be applied. If the second number is smaller than the first one, we are basically doing the expansion. So we are making the highs louder after they reach a certain threshold, which is minus 18.3 decibels right now. So let's say I want to compress that. I'm just gonna bring this down until it's red. And now we went into the compression section. So in time, I might just want to leave the transients and maybe want to do a really squashed sound. So I'm just gonna bring the release down. Also, I can solo that so I can see what's going on. We're gonna do something like that. So that's what we did. We can also try doing something to the below band to see how it works together with the above, right? So now a really interesting thing happened. We are getting also a gain reduction and a gain boost depending on the loudness of the signal. So when the sound is loud, there's a expansion, and when it's quiet, there's a gain reduction. So we are doing a downward expansion as well as upward expansion. So we are making quiet signals quieter and loud signals louder at the same time. We can do the opposite, right? To really accentuate that snare on the top. Let's do the same thing to the rest of the sound and see how it's gonna work together. It's gonna do something similar. Doesn't have to be really exactly the same thing because the levels of each of the bands are not equal. Yes, so we can now adjust the output doing this in here. So in this case, we got kind of like a tighter sound. We can also use the time to make it more squashed or tighter. Time basically modulates these parameters that we haven't touched. I forgot about this guy. Let me switch that to the way I want. Yeah, this is pretty now really tight and transient heavy. It's not really audible, but if you load an OTT, which is a part of the Multiband Dynamics, you can use a time to really hear the difference. This is really squashed, but if you push the time right, this is getting tighter. Overdrive. Overdrive is a distortion effect that pays homage to some classic pedal devices commonly used by guitarists. Unlike many distortion units, it can be driven extremely hard without sacrificing dynamic range. At the top of the effect is an EQ window. It allows you to set a desired frequency range that will be affected by the distortion. Drive, as always, is the amount of the distortion. Tone is the post-distortion EQ. Simply makes your sound brighter or darker. The higher it's set, the more highs it has. The dynamic slider allows you to adjust how much compression is applied as the distortion is increased. Lower settings mean more compression and higher less. Pedal. Pedal is a guitar distortion effect. The gain controls the amount of distortion applied to the dry signal. You can choose between 3 different pedal types: overdrive, warm and smooth, distortion, tight and aggressive, fuzz, unstable with a broken amp sound, There's also a 3-band EQ that you can use to shape the tone of the sound. It is applied after the distortion. This little slider decides how narrow is the mid-knob frequency range. If you want the sub to be boosted, you can turn on the sub button on. Phaser. Phaser uses a series of all-pass filters to create a phase shifting in the frequency spectrum of a sound. Pulse knob allow you to change the amount of frequency notches that are being created. As you can hear, while I'm tweaking the pulse knob, you can hear that some of the filter resonances are being added or subtracted. Along with the earth mode, the color can be adjusted. This changes the timbre of the sound. Space is the second mode that has a different sound. More feedback means the sound will resonate more and will be longer. Use the frequency slider to place the phasing effects. You can also use this view and drag the orange dot. As some of the previous effects, Phaser is equipped with envelope follower and LFO modulation. Use them to create some movement to the sound. The envelope follower is gonna work better for tighter sounds, not the sustain ones. Redux. Redux allows you to create that low resolution sound by reducing bits and downsampling it. Turn on bit reduction and start pulling the bit amount knob down. After some time you'll start to hear some artifacts. Also, you can use downsampling, which creates that FM modulation kind of effect. If you're looking to make your sounds sound 8-bit and really retro, this one is really great. Use hard and soft modes for different amount of downsampling. Resonators. Resonators create sharp frequency bumps called resonances to add some tonality. You can tune each of the individual resonators to a certain key to create chords and even melodies if you automate the on-off button. You can use a filter to limit resonators' bandwidth. You can choose from two types, A and B. Decay decides how long the sound will last. Color is a timbre control of the Resonators effect. The const switch holds the decay time constant regardless of the actual pitch. Width sets the stereo spread for resonators from 2 to 5. You can also fine-tune each of them. You can also set volumes for each individual one. Let's, for example, now turn off every single one. Now we can hear only one resonator, and it's playing on a note of C2. Now let's turn on another one. And now as you can hear, the second one is playing on the left side. If we turn on the fifth one, it's playing on the right side. So each of these from 2 to 5 are positioned in a stereo field, so the sound can be wide at the end. Reverb. It simply puts your sound in a certain space. First of all, signal goes from left to right, so it passes a filter section. In here you can target frequencies you want the reverb to occupy. For example, pretty common thing to do would be to cut low end, especially if you're putting reverb on a bass sound. The pre-delay knob defines how much delayed is reverb. If you play a sound now, the reverb will play maximum 250 milliseconds later. So now let's set it to 0.5 and the reverb will start playing immediately. Once we set that to 250 milliseconds, you will hear that the reverb is a bit delayed. As you can hear, the sound kind of changes from more like a chorus one to more metallic one if we increase the pre-delay. Early reflections is the next thing in a processing chain. These are the earliest echoes that you hear after they bounce off a room's walls. Turn on spin for more of a chorus effect and turn it off for a more metallic sound. To adjust the chorus modulation, use the panel below. Shape decides how sharp are early reflections. Lower values make them hit harder, while higher sound softer. In the global section, go ahead and turn on that high quality mode, god damn it. What, you want your reverb to sound like garbage? Unless you try to be eco-friendly, then you can turn on echo. But no, otherwise just use a high quality mode. Underneath, we have the size of the room, and even further down, you can set your reverb to be mono or stereo. So now diffusion network. This one was pretty confusing for me first when I started using Ableton's reverb, but it's simply late reflections. The decay time represents the length of the reverb. Once the reverb is playing, you can freeze it to turn it into a pad. Now the reverb will play endlessly. So the diffusion network. Before we get into the messing with it, on the right side you can see the reflect and diffuse knobs. The first one is responsible for the volume of early reflections and the second one for diffusion network. So what we can do to hear the diffusion network, how it works better, we can pull the reflect down to minus 30 decibels. So now only the diffusion network mostly will play. Okay, so there's no sound now, almost, really quiet. Now we have early reflections. As you can hear, the decay time makes a bit of a difference, but it doesn't change the length of the sound. So now let's make them minus 30 decibels and now let's use the diffuse only. So now the decay time makes the sound longer. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just cut some high end. Yeah, let's say this is the reverb I'm highly satisfied with. Now we can connect this with early reflections by just putting the volume back to 0 decibels. And now we have both things playing at the same time. So the density knob controls the diffusion's network density. The higher it's set, the denser the echoes of the late reflections will be. Let's do the same thing as we did before. The scale knob controls coarseness of the diffusion network. Higher values produce darker sounds. So the next thing is the actual chorus. There are also two options that work along with the freeze knob. Flat turns off the filters. So now I played the same sound twice. I played the saw wave twice. And when the cut was turned off, the signal was added to already frozen reverb. If you turn on the cut and you play the sound while the reverb is frozen, it will not be added to the reverb. Saturator. Saturator is a wave shaping effect that can add that missing dirt, punch, or warmth to your sound. It can coat input signals with a soft saturation or drive them into many different flavors of distortion. In the middle there is a window that shows you the actual shape graph that is being applied to the sound. Below we got 7 different types of distortion. Drive adjusts the amount of the saturation, but it's simply an input gain. Activating the color button enables 2 filters. The first of these, controlled with the bass control, dictates how much the filter will be reduced or increased for low frequencies. The second filter is an equalizer that works together with width and depth knobs. Width is the frequency range of the second filter and depth is the second filter's amount. The saturation types include analog clip, soft sine, medium curve, hard curve, sinoid fold, digital clip. The last one is a wave shaper and can be manually manipulated. Every single one of these obviously sound differently. In the output section we got a soft clip which rounds the corners of the waveform, preventing it from hard clipping. So now the wave shaper. The wave shaper mode's 6 additional parameters are drive, linearity, curve, damp, depth, and period. Drive determines the amount of the distortion. Linearity works together with the curve and depth parameters to alter the linear portion of the shaping curve. Damp flattens any signal near the grid's origin. It behaves like an ultra-fast noise gate. You can notice that, especially in here, when we have a release on an open hi-hat. And now hi-hats are almost completely gone, there's a little bit of the noise happening. Period determines the density of ripples in the superimposed sine wave. It's gonna make your sound super FM synthy. Okay, so let's take a different sound. Now the saw wave sounds like an actual FM synth. Also, there's an output gain. If something is too loud, you can bring the volume down. Spectrum. Spectrum performs real-time frequency analysis of incoming audio signals. It just shows you the frequencies of the sound. First of all, block is the amount of samples that are being analyzed each measurement. It basically makes the spectrum more accurate. Because there's more data, the spectrum can be smoother. You can view frequencies of only left or right channels or both. The refresh rate is how often the frequency view will be refreshed. So higher values, which is a slower refresh rate, will create more of a choppy view, while lower ones will make it pretty smooth. The average slider, while it's on the lowest value, the view will be updated more often. While it's on higher values, it's mostly useful to see peaks that have been here for a longer time, because the values of them is more of an average one instead of a quick peak like it's on the lower value. So below you can adjust what the view consists of. Bins or line is purely visual. It just fills that gap here. Max shows you the maximum amplitude of the sound. Which is that thing in the background. If it gets louder, then it's gonna update and stay updated as it is now. Scale X is simply a view mode. It can be linear, logarithmic, and the one that consists of note names. This one sets the visible dynamic range of the spectrum. If it's automatic, it will get adjusted to the dynamic range of the song or of the sound. While it's on manual, you can set how much view you have. So now it's -188, which is -188 here. We can just make it smaller by zooming in. Can go to -0. If you hover over the view, you can see frequency, note, and amplitude information. Tuner. Apply a tuner onto a desired track to tune sounds into a certain key. You can toggle between two visual modes. Target, which is this one. The view will show you how much offset is your sound from the perfect pitch. In this case it's +4 cents, so what you have to do is to tune your sounds. So the tuner shows you it's in the middle, so the dot is in the middle, and the tuner turns green. Now we know that this is note A and that it has a perfect pitch. So the second view is strobe, which kind of does a similar thing, but it has some lines that are just rotating. So when you tune it, the lines do not move anymore. Also, there's another view, this one, that shows you the line and the whole notes. You can zoom in or zoom out by using the thing here. Then you can see if the lines are not matching with the longer lines, that means that this is out of tune. Also, you can decide whether you want to see values in cents or hertz, just clicking right here. Reference is usually set to 440 hertz, but it can be changed from 110 to 180, dependent on your tuning needs. Utility. Very simple, it's super useful effect. So let's start with the section on the left and then the section on the right. The input section allows you to invert the phase of left, right, or both channels.
Man, that beat's so nutty.
You can solo left, right, or stereo channels, or even swap them. So using the swap option will change your right channel to the left channel. It will basically mirror them. Utility allows you to set the width of the sound, both make it narrow or super wide. Click mono to listen to both left and right channels merge into one, to see what your song sounds in mono. This one is really great if you want to see what your song will sound on mono speakers like on the phone. Bass mono allows you to make all frequencies below a certain point mono. You can also preview what frequencies are you targeting with this headphones button. Output section allows you to set the gain and the stereo field bound. DC option filters out extremely low frequencies that are not audible to a human ear, but can affect the further post-processing. So imagine there's an unaudible low end in the song, and I'm trying to master it. So that low end will be affecting other things like distortion and making the whole thing just sound worse. You can click mute to just mute the output. So utility is super useful to be dropped on the master track to make your sub mono and to have the ability to listen to your mix in mono just with one click. It is also great to replicate the track's volume automation, which, as we should know, is not the best idea to use. So if you wanna just make the volume of the track quieter in certain places with an automation line, I highly recommend to use the gain knob, because if you automate this slider and you wanna then change its volume, you will then have to change the volume in an automation line, which is not really convenient. Vinyl distortion. The vinyl distortion effect emulates some of the typical distortions that occur on vinyl records during playback. These distortions are caused by the geometric relationships between the needle and the recording groove. The effect also features a crackle generator for adding noisy artifacts. You can modify the crackle's volume with the first knob and its tone with the density knob. Unfortunately, the crackle doesn't have an envelope follower, so it keeps playing all the time, as you can hear right now. But sometimes it is a really nice addition. So the tracing model adds even harmonic distortion to the input signal. You can move this yellow dot around to adjust frequency and amount of the distortion. This slider here is dedicated to the bandwidth of the filter. You can also change the bandwidth holding Alt and dragging up and down. That's kind of nice. Below we have another distortion unit. This one adds up harmonics and makes the sound super wide. You can adjust the filter the same way as in tracing model. Also down below we have a drive knob which controls the global amount of the distortion. Vocoder. A vocoder is an effect that combines the frequency information of one audio signal, called the carrier, with the amplitude contour of another audio signal, called the modulator. The modulator source is generally something with a clear rhythmic character such as speech or drums, while the carrier is typically a harmonically rich synthesizer such as a string or pad. The most familiar application of a vocoder is to create talking synthesizer or robotic voice effects. While this is pretty hard to understand, let's talk some examples. So the carrier is basically a thing that is gonna affect your sound. So the sound we have is this vocal. And if we apply a vocoder, it turns into a noise, because as a carrier we have set the noise. So as I said, the carrier is gonna be the thing that just affects the sound. So in this case, the noise is affecting the sound. Grab that dot and control the noise. The next one is an external carrier. For example, rich synthesizer that is playing chords. Simply choose a track that the synth is sitting on and select whether you want a dry signal or a signal with post-processing. Another type of carrier is modulator. Modulator is our vocal in this case, so it's gonna use itself as a carrier. In this case, you can apply all sorts of cool effects to it. The last one is pitch tracking, which basically turns your sound into a synth, depending on the oscillator, also pitch tracking it. Here you can set the pitch, the waveform, and the range that the pitch tracking will be affecting. Let's stick to external carrier for now and explore more functions. Unvoiced knob allows you to add noise generator to the sound. Sensitivity knob determines how much of the noise is going to affect the sound. Slow and fast types decide how quick the detection is. In the middle we have our main filter view. Think of it as of the EQ, but each of the stripes is a bandpass filter. Bands is the amount of EQ bands. Higher values add more details, while lower make carrier more pronounced. Range is simply the EQ frequency range. Bandwidth, also BW, sets the width of each bandpass filter. So the lower settings is gonna introduce more of a resonance feeling. Precise and retro change the bandpass filter response to frequencies. Retro causes the sound to be more harsh in high frequencies. You can use gate for a watery feeling. You can also draw a shape in the filter section. This is just like an EQ. You can make the certain bands just quieter. Level is the vocoder's output level. Depth controls how much of the modulator's amplitude envelope is going to be applied to the carrier's signal. As you can see, less depth makes your carrier more pronounced. Attack and release adjust how quickly vocoder will respond to amplitude changes. Again, this is the modulator's attack and release, so this has an impact on how much the carrier is pronounced. Formant lets you shift frequencies of the main filter up and down, resulting in a formant shift. Mono, stereo and left-right allow you to decide how the vocoder treats stereo material. Mono, both modulator and carrier are mono. Stereo, modulator is mono, but carrier is stereo. And left-right, modular is stereo as well as carrier. Yeah, we can sound like this. We can also apply some reverb. So that's it. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, you can side on that subscribe button. Also, you can visit my site oversample.us for some high quality samples, presets and free sounds.